चलिए आगे बढ़ते हैं अपने सेशन पे। जो लास्ट सेशन था हम लोगों ने बात की थी उसमें इंटरनल सिक्योरिटी रिगार्डिंग त्रिपुरा। आज वेस्ट बंगाल कवर किया जाएगा। बट कमिंग टू द एग्जाम प्रिपरेशन के रिगार्डिंग नाउ थिंग इज, ये सारी जो इंटरनल सिक्योरिटीज के पैरामीटर्स हैं या फिर जो भी लाइक इट्स बीइंग ऑब्सोलीट, पुरानी कथाएं हो गई हैं। What we need to get is just a references of reform. That's all. Now here the major problem is at the older training, most of the internal security issues were coming regarding the peasants, coming from the peasant side. Okay. Secondly, ideology. People having different ideology was the major reason for the issue of internal securities. Now the thing is, situation is getting changed. How come? What can be the possible reason for this internal security issues? Is failure of governance. Secondly, corruption. Thirdly, different associations created. Social media. Religion. Caste can become a major problem. So these can be the major source of revolution. Regarding ideology type, a way of socialism can be explained in terms of unemployment growth, and inflation. These are the major factors which can erupt a violent activities in a nation. So इन सारे मुद्दों को लेकर के सरकार की क्या योजनाएं हैं, कैसे वो प्रिपेयर करती है, ईदर थ्रू strengthening of policing, media, intelligence, and so socio-economic policies and other security measures. So these are the standard approach जो कि लेने चाहिए। चलिए देखते हैं एक बार वेस्ट बंगाल में क्या हुआ था, क्यों इट वॉज अ थ्रेट टू अ नेशन। ओके, एज ये जो है ये आपका वेस्ट बंगाल का मैप है। एज यू कैन सी बॉर्डर इज पोरस विद बांग्लादेश, Assam it is touching, Bhutan, Sikkim at the top, Nepal, Jharkhand, Bihar and Odisha. So the thing is it can, if any kind of activities happens in this region, it will affect its surrounding states and might be countries also. So that becomes a critical point because like this is the chicken neck which connects India with northeast region. So एक इस प्रकार की दृष्टि से भी वेस्ट बंगाल एक इम्पॉर्टेंट एरिया हो जाता है। सो हेयर जो वेस्ट बंगाल में हुआ था, किसानों के साथ हुआ था। पीजेंट अपराइजिंग हैज बीन ऑर्गेनाइज्ड एंड इट वाज ऑर्गेनाइज्ड बाय कम्युनिस्ट। और इस मूवमेंट को जो पहले हुआ था उसे तेभगा मूवमेंट कहते हैं। तेभगा मूवमेंट क्या होता है कि जो एग्रीकल्चरलिस्ट थे, दे स्टार्टेड अ स्ट्रगल किसान सभा के थ्रू, स्ट्रगल दैट 2/3 ऑफ द क्रॉप्स शुड बिलोंग टू द कल्टिवेटर एंड 1/3 टू द लैंडलॉर्ड्स। ये डिमांड थी। तो 1/3 तिभका कहा गया उसको, और शेयर क्रॉप्स 2/3 को बरगदार्स कहा गया। While these being several peasant movement in the country, but almost all of them, instead of bringing secular agrarian reforms, were passive and non-violent. It started during the time of backdrop of independence movement, which first expression of revolt by rural masses mobilized by communists, the worsening condition of the poor peasants coupled with famine, high inflation, incoming of refugees from East Bengal, who took sharecropping provided an ideal start, and uprising with the demand of eviction, 2/3 shares, right of stock harvested crops in the Bagradars farmland, reduction in the exorbitant interest rate on advance, elimination of illegal exaction, abwabs जिसे कहा गया, ये सारे डिमांड्स थी। सो जो तिभका मूवमेंट था, द पीजेंट मूवमेंट लॉन्च इन 1946 सितंबर में लॉन्च हुआ था। मूवमेंट इसको आया जलपाईगुड़ी में 1946 में, दिनाजपुर, रांगपुर of North Bengal, and then it is spread to the southern districts. So while the peasants and landless laborers like Rajbanshis, Namasundras, Muslims took active part, it was an Adivasis, Santals and Hojongs who were forefront of the movement of North Bengal. The movement started in Atiwari village, which is there in Dinajpur, where the peasants harvested the crop and brought to their thrashing floor, the kamar, instead of khamar. Peasants harvested the crop and brought to their thrashing floor kamars instead of landlord's khamar. मतलब इन्होंने कटाई करने के बाद जो हुआ वो अपने थ्रैशिंग फ्लोर में लेके आए, रादर देन मालिक के या फिर लैंडलॉर्ड के हमार में ले जाने से। So since the uprising was spontaneous, the landlord and administration were taken aback and could not respond, which provided free run to the peasants. However, when they were resisted by the landlords, private army and police, peasants resorted to the violence by burning the government buildings, landlord houses, etc. फिर in order to bring the situation under control, Muslim League government in Bengal in 20 January 1947 accepted that most demands of the peasants led by Kisan Sabha, circulated the Bagradar Bill in 1947, published in the Gazette. Once the Kisan Sabha pulled out from the movement, the bill was promptly withdrawn and it never became an act. Beside conciliatory approach, scholars argue that Suhrawardi government also used coercive tactics as well as the Hindu-Muslim tension to divide the peasantry and weaken the movement. The fact that Kisan Sabha was not clear about the aim, strategy, continuation of the movement added to the end of the movement quite abruptly without bringing in concrete changes in the material conditions of the sharecroppers and landless peasants. So in March 1947, it fizzled out in the state. Now, communist movement, which was there in 1948 and 52, CPI extended its cooperation to the Congress government at the center and the state, so that the government at both level are being positions to manage the grim situation arising out of the riots because of the partition of Bengal. Now, because of the partition, there was an influx of people, immigrants from East Bengal. Simple thing, population is getting reduced, resources will get distributed, and no one wants like my resources should get distributed to some outcomers. So the communists, however, withdraw their cooperation once the riot stops and the situation normalized. By late 1947, the withdrawal of the support of the government was triggered by the realization that they were losing the political initiative to organize the mass movement in order to seize the political power from an independent India. The communists soon started organizing peasants against the landlords' demand of abolition of zamindari system. Ongoing Telangana movement provided a model of communists to follow in Bengal. In addition, several such communist movements in other parts of Asia also provided required impetus for them to revive their activities. In fact, February-March 1948, the Communist organized its second Congress wherein it adopted political thesis, in which it argued that the national government established was indeed an enemy of freedom, democracy for Indian people and therefore needed to be overthrown, which was called as People Democratic Revolution. In place of People Democratic Republic, a republic of workers, peasants, oppressed middle class would be installed. Incidentally, within a week, Second Congress, the CPI was banned by the state government in March and its all leaders were arrested. Despite the ban, communists were able to carry out these activities, especially in the countryside. Between 1948 and 49, they mobilized the sharecroppers, the demand of abolition of zamindari without the compensation and bestowing the lands to the tillers. The peasant movement was effective in accessible places in rural Bengal like Kakdweep in 24 Parganas, Domjur, Jagat, Balafpur in Havda, Boraka, Bora Kamalpur, Chanditala areas in Hooghly, Jaipur, Vishnupur police station in Bankura, Agratui, Raina area in Burdwan, Tamluk, Hatal, Sardar subdivision in Midnapur district. In tribal dominated regions of the state, communists organized Adivasis and raised the demand of raising daily wages and fixing working hours for the laborers. They were close to 170 incident of demonstration, rioting, looting, attacks on the landlord, clashes with the police, etc. The communist effort to overthrow the state government, however, did not found any purchase. Purchase simply means any platform amongst the peasant and the tribal people because this section of the population was driven against the government by their own grievances rather than idea of installing people republic. In fact, the peasants and tribes people did not understand the idea of communist itself. Peasants' uprising remained highly localized and therefore could not be threatened the state government. The increased incident of violence also proved to be a turn of the people, especially in the urban areas. They started distancing themselves from communists. In fact, 1948 and 50, the members of the Communist Party have fallen from 90,000 to 20,000. The loss of popular support, coupled with the arrest of its leader, forced the CPI to rethink its strategy and now refrain from terrorist attacks and focused on anti-communalism. The ouster of B.T. Ranadive and the decision of the party to fight the general election effectively brought the communist movement at the state to end. Then started the Naxalbari movement. The second phase of the communist movement in the state began in 1960s as the situation of the countryside continued to be fraught. Despite this enactment of legal provisions for safeguarding the land of the poor peasants, the landlord exploited the loopholes and refused to surrender their excess land. It was against the backdrop of Kisan Sabha started mobilizing peasants in the rural areas including Naxalbari, where some lands were recovered from the landlords. Incidents of evictions of the sharecroppers were reduced. This movement, however, received a setback because of the internal dissensions within the party and eventual split of CPI. Intense debate within the CPI broke out whether to support the Congress party policies or bring socialism peacefully or through radical means. Following the India-China border war, the number of Kisan Sabha leaders either were arrested and were underground. Sino-Soviet split also led pro-Chinese group to break away from CPI and form CPIM Marxist. After the breakup, most of the party cell in North Bengal were captured by CPIM, who advocated moderate lines. Such line of action was not acceptable to extremist element in the party like Charu Majumdar, Kanu Sanyal, and Jungle Santhal. Inspired by the ideology propagated by Mao Tse-tung, Charu Mazumdar became the ideologue and propagated violent revolution to establish the authority of the peasants in countryside. Kanu Sanyal spread the organization network and Jagan Santhal mobilized the Adivasis. On 3rd March 1967, a group of peasants surrounded a plot of land in Naxalbari, marked the boundaries with red flag, began harvesting the crops, thus sowing the seed of future Maoist insurgency 20 years after the end of the first major peasants uprising in Bengal. In next couple of months, the peasants organized themselves into Krishak Samiti, Peasants Committee, under the leadership of extremist faction of CPIM. These committees, together with the Adivasis militia, seized the land of the landlords and forcibly cultivated them to establish their ownership, burnt out land records, looted weapons of landlords, established people code, and passed the death sentence on the landlords. The area upon which peasant committees has established their stronghold were Naxalbari, Haribari, Fansideva in Siliguri. Subdivisions matter went ahead on 25th May 1967 when police fired on crowd which had gathered the protest against the killing of the peasants on the previous day. Police firing led to the death of 11 persons including 7 women and 2 infants. This incident further infuriated the peasants and they intensified their violent activities. The bows and arrows of the Adivasis were replaced by the firearms. Incident of loots, arson, murder increased and people started clamoring for the state intervention. The state government finally responded and successfully suppressed the Naxalbari movement. The leaders of the peasants movement in Naxalbari attributed to the 4 reasons. First, lack of a strong party organization, failure to build a powerful mass base, ignorance of military affairs, a formal attitude towards the land reform. Kanu Sanyal suggested in his report that the next phase of the struggle for the revolutionary would set up party units which will be fully armed. In 13th November 1967, the extremists expelled from the CPIM formed an All India Coordination Committee of Revolutionary AICCR, issued a declaration which started that party will develop and coordinate militants and revolutionary struggle for the peasants and working class and popularize thought of Mao Tse-tung, which is Marxism and Leninism. On 14th May 1608, AICCR transformed itself into AICCR, which is subsequently dissolved. A new party, CPI Marxist and Leninist, was formed in 22nd April 1969 as Charu Majumdar as its chairman. The Debra Gopi Balafpur uprising. While Naxalbari rebellion was successful, doused by the government, put down doused by the government, the fire kindled the peasant uprising spread to the rest of the state of India, such as Andhra Pradesh, Bihar, Punjab, Odisha, Tripura, Uttar Pradesh, and other parts of West Bengal. In West Bengal, after Naxalbari, Debra Gopi Ballabhpur, built in Midnapur district, was second phase of CPI, carried out rural guerrilla warfare. The belt bordered Bihar and Orissa was forested and substantially inhabited by tribal people. The peasant uprising in Gopiballapur and Debra began in September and October. The CPI Marxist and Leninist leader has exhorted educated students and professionals to leave their studies and professional and go to the countryside, integrate themselves with the peasant masses, impart political awareness to the villagers. Responding to the call, thousands of students and professionals of Kolkata and urban area left their studies, career and went to the village to indoctrinate the peasants and led the movement. Teaching there, indoctrinate means teaching ideology. This time around, peasants' armed revolution apparently represented a higher stage of class struggle. It was based on the campaign of annihilation of class enemy, an establishment of peasants' authority in red bases instead of mass mobilization. The aim of annihilation of class enemy was to spread red terror in the rural areas so that wanton killings would break the morale of the enemy. According the guerrilla squads organized armed raids on the houses of landlords, moneylenders, seized their crops, set up people court, try to the oppressor, most whom were given with a death sentence. The movement picked up in November 1969 when thousands of the armed peasants under the leadership of CPI-ML attacked the landlords, killed them, and distributed the food grains to the poor landless people, returned mortgaged property, fixed wages for the landless laborers, established peasant political power in the rural areas. The strategy was immensely successful because as some feudal landlords were killed and many fled the villages. Those who stayed behind they extended their support to CPI-ML, and because revolutionary overnight, 1969 CPI-ML consolidated its position about 200 square miles of liberated zone in Debra, Gopiballapur area, where the writ of state government did not run at all. But the state government responded by initiating police action, which was supported, bolstered by the development of CRPF against the communist rebel. In the matter of one, the guerrilla movement was contained inability of revolutionary to expand their activities and support outside the encircled area brought them into the conflict with the party leaders. Most on the ground activists favored mobilizing on the masses by organizing peasants committee instead of annihilation policy, but their suggestions were dismissed. Interestingly, instead of inspiring the rural masses to join the revolutionary as envisaged by Charu Majumdar, the policy of annihilation of class enemy, especially in the non-tribal areas, instilled a sense of fears in the poor and landless peasants, alienated them from the movement. In absence of political propaganda and mass organization, the politically unlettered villagers could not identify with political aims of the movement and saw the movement as nothing but the murder of their co-inhabitants by the town. Folk slogan "China chairman is our chairman" was lost on them. Furthermore, in the bid to shore up the morals of the cadres, Aru Majumdar has exhorted the cadres to intensify terror attacks on individual landlords and leave the area quickly to save thousands from police action. While this tactics helped the cadre to some extent, it left the poor villagers to face burn the police of police suppression, which highlighted its illusion to them. In fact, such was a disillusion that the peasantry refused to shelter to the guerrilla squads, provided information about suspected Naxalites when asked, willingly handed over insurgents to the police. Another factor that weakened the movement was conflict between the tribe people and the non-tribal people. The fact that Naxalites were not interested in the redistribution of the confiscated land, the tribal alienated them from the movement. And there were also the clashes between tribal and the students who were accused of trying to dominate the tribals. Internal conflict also started regarding handling of the power. Handling of power. That if it gets completed, if suppose that we got succeeded, who will hold the power? So there was a fight continuous. Along with that, certain urban movements was also growing. So while the peasants' uprising was being crushed in the rural areas, Kolkata and adjoining twin cities has started witnessing urban movement as CPI-ML ideologues and cadres started running to the cities, towns from the countryside. The urban movement of CPI-M had three main popular: destroy cultural heritage of Bengal, particularly the Bengali middle class, by profaning their cultural symbols. One more thing, rebels and communists do not believe in God because, as per the Marxist ideology, which says religion is a opium. ये धर्म चरस की तरह है. This was the Marxist ideology. It is used to make people control or to hide the reality of life. So because of that, they have a hatred regarding the heritage also. Carry out annihilation of class enemy campaign against police personnel, informers and political rivalries, build up arsenal by large scale snatching of the arms. Incidentally, the towns and the cities of the West Bengal were quite ripe for such an uprising because while higher education has expanded in the response to the demands of the middle classes post-independence, the concomitant increase in the economic growth was missing, resulting in the large scale of unemployment of educated youth. Industrial recession was going further contributed into the dampening of the employment prospects for thousands of engineers who have graduated from various engineering colleges. Between March April 1970-71, Kolkata and its suburbs were in the grips of unprecedented urban violence. The urban movements began by the CPI-ML cadre indulged in iconoclasm and incendiary activities, harming temples. The student destroyed the statues of social reformer political leaders such as Ram Mohan Roy, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, Mahatma Gandhi, Swami Vivekananda, and set the fire educational institutions. Students and youth also formed Red Guard Group. A group of 5 to 6 youths attacked the traffic constable, plainclothes policemen, police officers, personals on BSF and CRPF. In addition to the urban guerrilla squads, also snatched the weapons from the armed policemen after attacking significantly. The police did not have a public friendly appearance. It was looked down upon as corrupt and brutal forces such as public hostility against the police. When the attacks on the policemen happened in the broad daylight, the city people and townsfolk neither protected the policemen nor caught the assailant. Now, the state police was also highly politicized and divided because of the ruling CPIs had successfully infiltrated the police ranks and co-opted for the several of them. The compromised policemen formed a Calcutta Police Association and pleaded their allegiance to the party instead of state government. See, police machinery is also getting broken. The efficiency and morale of police were low, making them ineffective in the CPI-ML. The urban guerrillas, who between A1 April and 19 November killed 36 policemen, injured 400 others. Incidentally, most of the policemen's kills belong to the lower echelons, such as constables, sergeants, sub-inspector, police officers were rarely targeted. This was done primarily to break the morale of constabulary, which comprised of components of police force taking advantage of disarray in the police force. CPI-ML even reminded the lower echelon about their origin in peasantry, worker, petty bourgeoisie class, arranged them and turned against their bosses. The Kolkata police estimated by November 17 around 10,000 to 20,000 ML cadre were operating in the state, half of whom focused on Kolkata and adjoining areas. And an interesting aspect of the urban movement was that substantial portion of the cadres comprised of criminal and goons who were attracted by the alienation policy of Charu Majumdar and exploited the movements to settle the scores, expands their area of influence in the cities. In fact, when the students and youth leaders returned from the countryside to Kolkata, they realized that the vacuum left by them was filled by anti-social elements, bad characters. In rest of the industrial centers such as Durgapur, Asansol and Burdwan, CPI-ML mobilized the workers who formed the squads and attacked the police, snatched weapons, communist flags atop factories, Such attacks on the police became rampant by the end of 70s and 71. One of the urban movements in the state, one in Birbhum, is of significance because it showcased a close coordination between urban and rural tactics. The Naxalite activities in the district first started in towns such as Bolpur, Etampur, Suri, 1970s, where the students and youth were radicalized. Once radicalized, the youth indulged in arson, snatching guns from police and killing them. The rural areas, which were surrounded by the time, soon came under the spell of CPI-ML. The peasants started snatching the weapons from landlords. Police to unleash annihilation campaign. In fact, Birbhum witnessed the largest number of farm snatching incident. The location of the district close to Jharkhand, heavily forested tract provided Naxalite for an ideal shelter. Furthermore, the police in the district became completely ineffective because of the sheer panic introduced by the terror activities of the Naxalite and because of the several relatives of the policemen were directly or indirectly involved in CPI. The urban movements and the terror campaigns of Naxalites were brought to an end by the state government through police action and other political measures by mid-70s. Maoist resurgence in Jungle Mahal.
So then thereafter, after the lull of 2 decades, Maoist became active in the West Bengal once again in 1990s when they started organizing the people, especially the Adivasis, to demand the rights such as drinking water, healthcare, irrigation facilities, decent wages. One of the major factors responsible for the resurgence of Maoist activities in the tribal dominated districts of West Bengal is the break of down of the party society edifice. The CPIM, which ruled the state for 2 decades, till then had a symmetrically dismantled their traditional grievances, redressal and dispute resolution institutions such as landlord houses, caste council, religious assemblies, etc. In their place, it empowered the village panchayats dominated by CPIM as well as the district magistrate BDOs to distribute governmental benefits to the local people. The two structures were successfully in managing the rural discontentment when land transform reforms resulted in record agricultural productivity and the state government could afford to distribute the economic benefits amongst the people. However, agricultural productivity start falling in 1990s. Revenue generated through agriculture also fall. The largesse distributed by the parties through state governments amongst the people is spread thin. Moreover, the large-scale industrialization, which could have otherwise absorbed the growing workforce, especially in the agricultural labor, has gradually declined in the state, forcing the laborers to migrate to the other state in search of employment, falling revenues with the concomitant rise in the physical debt made the state government led by CPIM unable to meet the rising aspiration of the people, especially the rural people. Tribal dominated belt of the state was hardest hit because of the deindustrialization, falling of agricultural productivity. The region itself was dire state because the land was monocropped. With a little provision of irrigation, pervasive underdevelopment characterized the region with lack of absence of amenities such as health, education, drinking waters. The inability of CPIM to meet the basic requirement of the tribal people led to a gradual erosion of its legitimacy as the sole arbitrator in the tribal dominated area. The vacuum was gradually filled by the Maoists who had been entering the tribal dominated regions from adjoining Jharkhand. Over the period of time, they started mobilizing the Adivasis around the certain basic grievances, issues such as lack of basic amenities, employment, end to the harassment by the forest guard, police, and so forth. The articulation of these grievances became the major agenda of the Maoist movement and intensified when faced with the repressive action of the state government. The Maoists even demanded autonomy of the districts such as Purulia, Bankura, West Medinapur on the lines of Darjeeling Gorkha Hill Council. In the beginning, Maoists employed peaceful means such as protest, march to the divisional office and petition, but the state government started suppressing the protesters. The Maoists became violent and started targeting the CPIM cadre and the sympathizers. Matter came to the head when, to November 2008, the Maoists targeted the convoy of Union Minister Jitin Prasada, Ramvilas Paswan, the Chief Minister Bodhadev Bhattacharya, and the State Minister Nirupam Sen at Salboni in Medinapur district. Fortunately, no one was killed in the incident. Following the attack, police carried out investigation and arrested numbers of villagers in the Lalga Ghar area. The Adivasis were indignant about the way police has handled the investigation and viewed the police action as an affront to tribal culture and tradition. In response, the police brazenness, the Adivasis started protest and quickly spreaded to the adjoining area. The tribal protests were organized by and led by the People Committee against police atrocities, which was backed by Maoists as well as the political parties opposed to CPIM. The protesters became blockading the areas, thereby effectively denying the entry of police, prevented the administration to function. Such was the success of blockade that many observers believed that Maoists had hijacked the movement and established a liberated zones in Agra. Once liberated zone was established, the Maoists expanded their area influenced by burning down police station, offices of CPIM in Dharampur, Bilitikiri, Koima, Ramgarh. They also killed a large number of local CPIM leaders and cadres. The Maoists tried to protest that the Lalgarh unrest as a social uprising against the state government. The unrest also had a separatist underpinning as Aditya Group of Jharkhand Party, which was supported the movement was doing on the understanding that the tribal dominated areas like Putlia, Bankura and Medinipur were to be merged with Jharkhand. The Maoists had found a similar opportunity to register their presence in the state earlier 2006 and 7 when the state government decided to acquire 22,000 acre land of Nandigram for establishing a chemical special economic zone. The people of Nandigram were not enthusiastic about the government proposed setting up a special economic zone given that earlier attempts at industrialization in their area has failed. They are also suspicious of the government plan to acquire the land and therefore demanded more information and transparency. The government and CPIM, however, were not forthcoming with the information desired by the villagers. In response of the state apathy, people of Nandigram started protest 2007 against the land acquisition and fortified the villages which were to be acquired for setting up siege. The villagers in fact dug up roads, established camp, organized night vigil to prevent police as well CPIM cadres from accessing their area, thereby effectively creating a liberated zone called as Muktanchal. In movement against the land acquisition in Nandigram and adjoining areas were spearheading by Bhumi Uched Pratirod Committee. The Committee Against Land Disposition, composed of 22 organizations, while the political parties such as Trinamool Congress, Jamaat Ulema-e-Hind were part of this committee, it was suspected that Maoists were actively involved in the movement. In fact, such suspicion were proven true when Maoist leader Ganapathy in an interview said, Kalinganagar, Sengur and Nandigram in particular have an important symbol in this struggle. As our role in such movement, we shall definitely make our efforts in the forefront and lead the movement in correct direction. As mentioned, the protester did not allow single outsider, including the police personnel or CPIM cadre, to enter into Nandigram. After 2 months, the police along CPI armed cadres attempted to enter Nandigram. However, this attempt made with violence in ensuing police firing. 14 people were killed. Following this incident, the state government declared the proposal of setting SEZ in Nandigram has been postponed and no land shall be acquired forcefully from the villages. Despite the assurance from the government, the people of Nandigram continued with the blockade. It was only after 10 months that blockade could be broken by the combined might of CRPF and the police and the armed CPIM militia. West Bengal was badly hit by Maoist violence in 2006 to 2011. In 2006, 23 violent incidents happened where 17 people lost their life. The number of violent incidents rose to 32 in subsequent year. Maoist-related violence accelerated in 2009 onwards when 255 violent incidents were recorded, in which 158 persons lost their life. In 2010, violence peaked to 355 violence incident with 258 deaths. In fact, between 2009 and 2011, the Maoist has established a liberated zone in Jungle Mahal comprising 3 districts: West Medinipur, Purulia, Bankura. However, in 2011 onwards, Maoist insurgency in the state had saw a drastic decline. In the year 90s, incident 41 were recorded. 2012, only 6 incidents were reported, and since 2014, there was no report of Maoist-related violence in the state. What was the strategies, counter-offensive strategies by the state government? First, there was legislation-wise. In the wake of communist movement, West government introduced West Government Security Bill 1947. The bill was intended to legalize an ordinance brought by previous Muslim League to crush the peasant uprising. The bill proposed to detain the rebels without trial for 6 months. Under this bill, around 1486 people were detained rebels without trials up to 6 months. The bill finally became an Act, West Bengal Security Act, and came force into 26 January 1950s. The Act makes special provision for the maintenance of public order by prevention of illegal acquisition, possession or use of arms, suppression of subversive movement endangering communal harmony or safety or the stability of the state, and suppression of gundas, and maintaining supplies and services essential to life of the communities. Compelled by the peasant movement led by CPI, between 48 and 52, the West Bengal government tried to provide the security to the sharecroppers and landless peasants. According, it enacted Bagradar Act, which after few modification adopted West Bengal Land Reform Act in 1955. It provides certain rights interstate of Bagradas, owner of the land, and establishment of Bhagchas Conciliation Board for the settlement of disputes relating to the certain matters of Bagradas and owner of the land. 3 years later, some more comprehensive and important act known as West Bengal Estates Acquisition Acts was passed. The act aimed at eliminating intermediaries, Samidars, Jotedar on all land except which they self-cultivated by hiring laborers. The Act divided all the landlords and holders of the interest in the lands in 2 categories: intermediaries and riayats, fixed rent tenants. It allowed intermediaries possession of 25 acres of agricultural khas land, 15 acres of non-agricultural land, 5 acres of homestead lands, and a total of 45 acres per head. For riayats who were cultivating the rest of the intermediaries, land were brought directly under the state government. 2 years later, Land Reform Act was passed. The act aimed at limiting the land's owner ability to transfer their land in order to prevent them from circumventing the land holding ceilings, provided a better rights to the sharecroppers. The act covers a range of lands-related topics, but most significantly it defines the right and obligation of landowners and bagradars, prohibits fixed rent leasing of land, place a ceiling of seize of land holding defines how land taken by the government should be distributed, and limits the transferability of land held by scheduled tribes members as much of the lot obtained through redistribution. While these two land reforms act were successful to some extent in abolishing the intermediaries and providing a greater land rights to the actual cultivators, both the land were flagrantly violated by the landlords in deliberately suppressing the amount of land owned by them. Malified transfers, including Benami fictitious transfers, Mitakshara law of inheritance. In fact, many landlords evicted the laborers cultivating their lands, leading to an increase of landless agricultural laborers in the state. The landlords also filed a large number of suits claiming fundamental right to the property as vested in the constitution. These factors that resulted in the poor implementation of the Land Reform Acts generated a lot of anger and frustration amongst the poor peasantry, and consequently they rose up against the corrupt and cruel landlords in 1965-67. Though it was only after CPIM came to the power in 1977 that a comprehensive and successful implementation of land reform legislations were initiated and achieved. The state government laid emphasis on safeguarding their interests and the rights of Bagratars. For this purpose, it acted more proactively to take land that exceeded the ceiling limits, as well as amended the Land Reform Acts in order to plug the loopholes in earlier legislation which allowed the exemptions to the ceiling for religious and charitable trust, plantation and fisheries. The amendment for the first time defined personal cultivation as an actual cultivation of the land in order to remove absentees, landlordism, to improve status of sharecroppers, landlords, so that landlords are compelled to give their due share of the produce. What was the political response? So, for the ruling of United Front government headed by CPIM, the violent movement in 1967 caused a great dilemma because on one hand the violence was against the norms of democratic centralism to which Marxist party adhere. On the other hand, movement was undertaken by the poor peasants and the tribesmen under the leadership of their own local unit. Faced with dilemma, the state government tried to unsuccessfully to talk to the rebels by sending cabinet mission consisting of 6 ministers on 12 June 1967. As the violence continued relentlessly, the cabinet mission suggested police patrolling in disturbed areas, sealing of state borders with Nepal. Pakistan provided police protection on receiving complaints. The West Bengal State Committee of CPIM also expelled 19 leaders, including Charu Majumdar, Kanu Sanyal, along with 400 members, along with the Darjeeling District Committee of CPIM, which spearheaded the entire movement, was also disbanded. After the lull of 2 years, when the peasants uprising led by CPI-ML spread in Debra Goballapur belt, the CPI-M government, which came into power in 1969, ignored the activities of CPI-ML for the political expediency during the election. CPI-M leaders has promised that no action will be taken to stall democratic movements by taking action against the activists. So once in power, the state government released all the prisoners arrested during the Naxalbari police action. The CPIM government supported the controlled violence as they wanted to send out message to the masses as well as the union government that they were on carrying the flags of revolution within the limits of constitution. However, the increase in the lawlessness created by CPIML in the rural areas, the state leaders to reassess their perspective towards the CPIML and its activists. Finally, in December 1969, the state government launched out an all attacks on Naxalites. Despite police action initiated by the state government, the guerrillas squad continued with indiscriminate killing of landlords, moneylenders, informers, and most of its leaders also escaped the police dragnet. The reason behind this was the fact that CPIM leadership considered the CPIML as a group of adventurist and ideological dissidents who could be taken care of by the party cadres. If therefore did not give a clear directives to the police to emphatically put down the revolt. In the absence of any clear orders, police action did not go beyond containing the activities of ML cadres, throwing a cordon around the affected villages. In the beginning of 1917, saw a renewal of hostility between CPIM and CPIML as a state election were announced, while CPIM considered that CPI as renegades and CPIML regarded as new revisionist misdirected the people struggle. CPIML, like in 1969, gave a call for boycott of elections when to terrorize the voters. CPIM and ML marked out localities of Kolkata as their areas of influence. Any trespassing by either party was punished with death. What ensued was the cycle of torture and murder between the two left parties. In fact, CPIM armed squad and CPIM cadres killed numbers of leaders, workers, and sympathizers of each party. In this messy mix, the Congress cadre initially allied with CPIML hoodlums in order to target their rival, the CPIM, but once they came into the power, they started killing CPIML cadres, thus sounding a death knell to the urban movement. One of the major reasons of the failures of urban movement was absence of the guidance. Charu Mazumdar was neither planned nor crafted any strategy for urban movement. Even for his policy of annihilation of class enemy, there was no specific targets except for the police, a natural enemy for lumpen proletariat and CPI cadres a natural enemy of CPIML. It has been argued that urban movement in effect was started by the youth and the student, and CPIML leaders and its associate mainly accepted it as fate a company. Significantly, because the educated youth and the students could not get over their class of inhibition, they could not join anti-social wholeheartedly and killing people in cold blood. 1970 Charu Majumdar started doubting their sustainability of urban movement and its dependence on petty bourgeoisie youth. In CPI-ML in West Bengal also suffered because of multiple splits. In fact, at one point of time, there were about 5 or 6 Maoist groups proclaiming to be propagating the correct thought of Mao Tse-tung, and there was intense criticism of Charu Mazumdar for arrogating all the powers himself as well as his policy of annihilation. The split within the CPI-ML together with the intense police action deprived the CPI-ML to the dedicated cadres essentially for carrying out revolution. Once the CPIM came back into the power in 1977, it deftly suppressed the dissent, especially amongst the Adivasis. In fact, the party appointed aspirational Adivasi groups such as Santhal and Mathos as a local party leaders and provided resources for the poorer Rothas. However, as discussed earlier, the lack of developmental activities in the tribal dominated areas combined with dwindling financial resources in the state which constrained the CPIM in distributing state largesse to the police people, robbed the parties and its cadre of its legitimacy to rule. This political vacuum was exploited. This political vacuum was exploited by Maoists who started a reign of violence in the grab of fighting for the rights of people. To counter the Maoists, the CPIM established a camp in the affected district of Bankura, Purulia, West Midnapore district, which were manned by its armed cadre called Hamrat Bahini and vigilante groups such as Ganap Road Manch, People Resistance Force, and Maoist Daman Sena, Maoist Repression Force. The fierce struggle often broke out between CPIM militia and Maoist rebel, resulting in the number of deaths. Another organization that filled up this political vacuum in the tribal dominated was TMC. In fact, during the Lalgarh unrest, TMC leaders Mamata Banerjee even visited Lalgarh to show her solidarity with the tribal people. In run-up in 2011 state election, Mamata Banerjee had promised to remove all union and state armed forces, release all political prisoners without condition, and start a dialogue with the Maoist. The result were overtures with the people of Jumeirah and with the alleged tacit support of Maoist voted overwhelming for the TMC. So, 2011, when TMC came into the power after defeating CPIM, allegations were right that she has won the election with the help of Maoist. However, many commentators also agreed that the people of Jungle Mahal voted for TMC because they were disillusioned by CPIM, as were repelled by the Maoists for their indiscriminate killing of people who claimed were informers of the government. Be that as it may, the fact remains the Maoists were defeated in the state within a year of Mamata Banerjee coming to the power, who employed a dual strategy of coercing and development, continuing with the stance against the Maoists of the left government who had imprisoned a large number of Maoists. Mamata Banerjee set up a crack team of police officers to deal with the armed Maoists. She set up anti-Maoist armed vigilante group Bhairav Bahani TMC members to pass information about the Maoists to the police and CRPF. She also reached out to rebels, asked them to surrender and join the mainstream. She announced that lucrative surrenders and rehabilitation package of 1.5 lakhs were offered as fixed deposit for each rebel who surrendered with arm, which can be encashed after 3 years. Each surrender Maoist also received 2,000 per month as an allowance for 3 years till she was gainfully employed. Maoist rebels also received 25,000 to 2 lakhs depending on their quality of surrendering arms. TMC government also tried to win the people affected by Maoist violence by announcing compensation package for civilian killed in Maoist attacks. Under this package, the state government will provide 2 lakhs and union will provide 3 lakhs to the families of civilians fallen to the victims of such attacks. She also announced that in the fresh recruitment in the police force in Jungle Mahal, the local youth will be given preferences. Furthermore, the Mamata Banerjee government in 2012 tried to start a peace negotiation with the Maoist. She appointed 6 eminent persons as an interlocutors for a peace dialogues. The talk took place between July and October 11. During the negotiation, Maoist and state government agreed to halt fighting. However, killing of Maoist Politburo member Mojula Koteshwara Rao Kishanji, who was spearheaded Maoist operation in West Bengal Jamalgarh region, is an encounter in the November brought peace negotiation to an end. Divergence policy. Right. This is for the first part. We'll be shortly giving you the second part, what was the security response and the developmental operations, what West Bengal has seen. We'll be coming shortly with this upcoming from this part.